Again. Oh, I suddenly felt like Captain Obvious. As you know, here we go from the second part of our show, which is the part coming now, because we already had the first part. And I personally, so to speak, as it were, apparently, not being perhaps a living trompe-l'oeil. I notice nobody seemed to like that one. I'm trying to, people have requested some of the particular Kyroots are read, and since I was the only one left standing here in the parking lot, I'm going to try and make some comment. Here we go. Are you ready? There's nothing to say about this, but I'll reread it since someone enjoyed it. What's on the back? Help, I'm being held captive. Oh. And Kyroots said, whenever he'd do small talk, this one guy would really talk small. But he said it was only a fair reflection of the way he thought. Some of these I say that are obvious and I don't comment. Is it that they're not all that obvious to whoever asked for it? That what they're really wanting was that maybe if I'd talk long enough that they would feel in their own mind in some way they weasel themselves out and they became an exception to it? Is that why they asked? Make your ears go back and play like, boy, is that weird? Now, of course, look around like, well, it ain't me. That's one way you can tell a Baptist, can't you? Who are they talking about? All right, a Southern Baptist, then, if that makes you happy. And Chef Kyroots stirred up this little bid tit. The culinary concept of sweet and sour dishes arose from the surprise of man confronting the nature of his own nervous system. I like them when they explain themselves. Thank you, Mattel. One man says, Kyroots observes, one man says that there are definite limits to what he'll do, but they are ad hoc limits. Now we're getting somewhere. I don't even know whether to skate on the edge of blasphemy and put a name on such a man, such as maybe a revolutionist. But you do understand everyone's nervous system, besides saying it's too hot or too spicy, everyone's nervous system, that is everyone's personality, everyone's own mind, what apparently is the strength that holds one together, not booze, the strength. The glue of the cartilages and the spine. But everyone would say there are limits to what I can do. Even Christians, the Pope, I'm sure. You know, the Pope, just pick him out. He got shot, you remember, in our lifetime. And he went, Jesus, I've been shot. There are limits. And everyone will say it. But listen to this. This guy says there are definite limits to what he'll do. And that's before a whole bunch of dots, which is really ellipses just overdone. I mean, there's 8 or 10 of them here, which there's nothing in the dictionary to even cover it. But I assume it means, wait a minute, see. So I'm going to wait a minute. But take the first part. Is that a waste of time or what? One man says there are definite limits to what he'll do. I mean, boy, take notes, right? You catch the point? You know, he didn't start out picking on Catholics or anybody. It was to make the point here, the first part, before all these little dots. One man says there are definite limits to what he'll do. He'll surprise us. Well, what a shock. But then you got ellipses way overdone. There's even plurals. Well, anyway, dot. In other words, hesitate. But there are ad hoc limits. See, now is, I guess, a linguist. Who was it they referred to? The great dance team of Daniel and Noah Kyroots? What would you call that? The man says there are definite limits to what he'll do, which is everybody's the point. That you would have to. You don't have to play around with words. You just got to say there are limits to what I'll do. If I get shot in the head, I may die. I just may. I mean, sure, I weigh 300 pounds, and I could kick Methuselah's ass around if he was still alive, which is easy to say now. Is he still dead? I don't have to take any crap off anybody except maybe a bullet. In other words, there are limits. People just admit it. Death being the obvious one. But to make it easier, how about all the stuff between here and there? A man, I'm sure he'd have some psychological explanation that all of his family were alcoholics. And they beat him up and burnt down the house and squandered all of his possible inheritance, and they all died almost before he was born. And they stuck around long enough to mistreat him, and now he says, I enjoy having fun in life almost as well as the next man, but I'll tell you one thing, I don't drink because drinking is not fun. There are limits. See, that sounds better than... It's a man with some moral turpentine. What do you call it? All right. Fortitude. For those of you that can't figure out the... Wasn't that funny? Never mind. Unless you're a Southern Baptist, and it was probably hilarious. At any rate, the point being, everybody, no matter who they try to be, I was trying to take it all the way from religious to physical, but to say, as this guy does, that there are definite limits to what he'll do, again, I mean, it's just obvious. What else can you say? There are limits to what anybody will do, and not just physical prowess, not just one's religious convictions, but just in life. Like people say, well, I put up with so-and-so. I put up with the guy harassing me at work until I finally had to, tell him, lay off of me. I put up with my kid always wrecking my car and borrowing money. I told him, get out of the house. Or I told my wife or my husband that they're simply, even at the psychological and nervous system level, there are definite limits. And this guy says, he just points it out right off the bat. Beginning of the sentence, there are definite limits to what he'll do. But then, ... Now the man's getting unusual. He says, however, that the limits are ad hoc. You do the rest. That man may not even be a revolutionist, whatever that is. He may be something else. If a revolutionist is somewhere beyond column A and B of sweet and sour, I don't know, this man may be, that might be what that was. It's the back of the menu where it says, help, I'm being... Okay, I'll read this one. And Kyroots said, rather than be a revolutionist or, combination, take ordinary life too seriously, there was this one man in the city who said he adopted his own approach as opposed to either one of those. Wherein, in all the occasions he encountered in ordinary life, he simply said, can I get a discount? Which I might suggest that might not, if we wanted to play metaphor, that might not be as simplistic as might first appear. Of course, you're always left with this. If it appears real simplistic and you're good, you can say, God, am I simplistic? You can say it if you want to. And Kyroots said, postulate. Men with small minds have small problems. Into postulate. But billions of voices cried out, but what about me, the exception? It was a short paper. There's no note of an exception. I like that, but billions of voices cried out, but what about me, the exception? Almost makes you want to be a Southern Baptist. For what reason, I don't know. And Kyroots said, sometimes failure is recognized as failure and sometimes it is not. Helping identify and exemplify the distinction is part of the service that man renders to life. Is there something in the water tonight that I just am tempted to keep going on and not say anything? What else? The only thing we can reasonably talk about is this kind of taping level, because I know the quality of videotape we're using, and so I got to stay within certain limits of electromagnetic spectrum or it will not record. That being a given, on this planet where we were, talking about man and that which seems to be the observable, experiential aspect of physical life available to man within the confines of this particular electromagnetic area, on this planet, well, even in this universe, if you want it that way, what part of life ever expresses any sense of failure? Now, it is obvious, if we want to put anthropomorphic overlays on it, that if a jackal is out and he's chasing a wildebeest trying to get dinner, and as he's running along and somewhat carried away and really got his eye on the ball, so to speak, and he turns a corner and there's a lion with his mouth open, and the jackal runs right into the lion, and rather than having dinner, he becomes sane. Humans could look at that little scene and say, well, the jackal has just exemplified failure. That's not failure. That's simply the continual churning of life's accounts here at the Wall Street known as planet Earth. It is a continuing transfer of energy. There's only a human, is why I went ahead and said anthropomorphic, which is in truth unnecessary. But to say that the jackal failed, that he went out to kill something and have dinner, he ended up being killed and was dinner, you could say, well, hey, that is failure. Try and consider the scene and try and extract the undeniable, irrepressible almost urge to be anthropomorphic about it. How can you call that failure? I know I'm asking you to think about it as though you didn't have a mind. You understand? It's impossible for ordinary people, but then back to what are ordinary people doing listening to this, or what are some of you doing thinking, damn, I just wanted to be ordinary. Maybe a little bit better, but now I'm going nuts. Do you ever see jackals, for instance? If you want any other way, do you ever see, can you just imagine that this happens to one jackal? He's out there really going, maybe his buddies are going, go get him, Ralph, go get him, because maybe he'll share some. And Ralph is going at it and just running, just looking like a champ. And just suddenly, out of nowhere, this huge lion jumps out. Ralph is yesterday's news. Can you just picture the other jackals looking in some way like, God, that Ralph always was a loser. Jesus. Of course, the easy way, a few people see it by now, the easy way to describe all this is simply, if we're talking about any realm of three-dimensional reality, our reality, that is nonverbal, then all of the things that would be attributes of the human experience, everything that men want to anthropomorphize is on the basis of what they're doing, is doing it on inanimate objects or animate objects, things that are not human, but doing it for the one reason that whatever we're talking about, jackals, trees, the weather, they're anthropomorphizing on the basis, well, they don't describe it this way, but this covers it, that it cannot talk. Because if it could talk, you wouldn't have to anthropomorphize it. If jackals could talk, just what I described, and Ralph, while running and not looking what he's doing, runs right into a lion's mouth and becomes his snackaroo, and you ask the jackals, hey, then they could talk to you about failure. They could talk to you, well, Ralph's always had problems. I'm surprised he lasted this long. He trips a lot. Did you see his coat, last year's coat? It is, again, the kind of cutoff line that we've been using between what we're calling the primary and the secondary world. If something cannot talk, then it cannot experience. There's no way you cannot even compare, unless you're going to play dumb, ordinary anthropomorphization, that you can't even play. Well, look at that dog. That dog looks concerned. The dog looks guilty. The dog doesn't look guilty. Ralph looked chagrined just before the lion went. Now, he might have looked scared shitless, but he didn't look chagrined. If they can't talk, whatever it is, the weather, trees, fish, jackals, if they cannot talk, they cannot experience anything that humans describe as experience. Primarily emotions. It's primarily here, but to ordinary people, the first thing you think about is emotion. So, how could life have any sensation of failure? Assuming if life does fail. Which if it fails, it's simply like what appears to be anomalies within inside. We've been through this before, that you can hear, it sounds like a rod knocking an engine, except the car is still doing 120 miles an hour. And if you're a person of very limited sight, which if you're ordinary, you're a person of very limited sight, you get down close to where the noise is going on, you think, Jesus, this thing's coming apart. This thing we're experiencing, or we're right on the verge of experiencing, the early stages of major breakdown. notwithstanding the fact that if you look around the universe, I just said 120 miles an hour. You know it's going faster than that. I mean, you can tell. Anyway, it's going real fast. Just because you got the shingles or Gruber's syndrome, or just because you blew your whole week's pay down at the pool hall, you think, gee, life is coming apart. Just because that happened to you, if you're not ordinary, you can look around and think, well, I'll be down. Of course, you can excuse this away by the heartlessness of people. You look around and the rest of the world seems to be going right along, whistling and doing quite all right. When your heart is broken, damn it. But I know you'd blame other people for that. You could say, well, that doesn't prove anything, because most other people, especially when I've got the blues, most other people are heartless anyway. Plus, very low IQs. I don't know why. I never realized it until I kind of fall into a melancholy, poetic mood, and I can see clearer. And when things are not going well, I realize how stupid, how insensitive, but particularly stupid, most other people are. You know, on the basis that the whole world doesn't rush over and offer to lend you money, or, you know, hundreds of thousands of people don't lay you in their arms and go, oh, there, you know, pat you on the, So if you don't like that, of course you don't like that, you're not going to see this next one, but what the hell, I'll press on anyway, because we're not dealing with sequential matters anyway, are we? And somebody in the audience went, thank God. Whew. See, they thought they were seriously lost and that their brain had kind of short-circuited. No. At any rate, if you could get past the point that everybody, when you've got the blues, everyone believes the rest of the world's insensitive and stupid. How about this? Again, if you can't see that, you can't see the next one, but here we go. When you feel like that things internally, things at a very specific level, well, such as you may, there's a very good chance that you do have Grover's syndrome, for which there is no cure. You got to look, if you could stand to do it, and you're scared to death. You got to go to the doctor tomorrow to have even the test for Gruber's syndrome. You know, it's made a lot of grown men pass out. But anyway, so you got to do it tomorrow. But if you could, is just walk outside in the backyard and look up the universe. It's this old thing. In your eyes, the universe is going at least 120 miles. Well, I shouldn't fool around. It's probably doing close to 300, because you know that even cars here on the planet will go that fast. But it's just going, and sure as hell though, I'm not disputing, you have a kind of a knock, or you hear a knock in your engine. So you can call it, that's a minor failure, right? Except the thing's still going. So, back to where we were, you didn't lose your place, did you? And the guy out there went, ha, lose my place. At any rate, if life could experience any failure, temporary setback, transient anomaly, how would it feel it? Because it cannot feel it from the non-speakers. How does life orient itself? What could life learn from a jackal getting all identified and carried away and chasing this wildebeest, so carried away that runs right into the mouth of a lion, and instead of having dinner, becomes dinner? What's life going to learn from that? Because it was not a failure is the point. Nothing was amiss. What's life going to go, live and learn. Let me mark that down about we got to watch. You know, jackals not doing that and running into lions' mouths. That's not true. They got to run into it. Lions got to have something to eat. They got no McDonald's over there. The point is, there's nothing amiss of the jackal being eaten by the lion, right? So what's life going to learn? There's nothing to learn. That's the way it's supposed to be. What's the only thing that's changing that you can observe? Man. And if indeed, I'm not saying this is true, but if indeed you would think that life does in some way learn since man changes, and that apparently you look at it and think, well, man could have gone this way or that way, and I don't mean just billions of years ago, according to anthropologists and et cetera, but in the last 10 years, the last year, last week, that it seems as though man has some possibility of change. I mean, he obviously changes, but men want to imagine, well, things could have gone like this. You know, it is possible that Gorbachev could not, and you can start coming out with things that you read, might not have come to power when he did, and had he not. Now, it may have been a given that the communist Party on the erstwhile USSR might have collapsed eventually, but Had he not, had some of the members of Parliament, if such and such happened, if General so-and-so had been in the country back at that particular moment, he might not have come to power. In other words, that history, even if it had finally come to where it is now, could have taken a slightly different turn. That is where the ordinary mind would say, life does live and learn. That is, that life is playing around in a sense. That's what evolution, survival of the fittest. Do you remember where we were? If life does learn, if life is playing around, well, for one thing, on this planet, in the universe as far as man's seen, but at least on this planet, it's playing around. It's experimenting only with one creature, man. And taking an anthropomorphic view now for life, not jackals, trying to look up rather than down the scale, then you would think, well, if it is treating man as a malleable, as an unfinished process, then it does have choices. We could have done so-and-so, and it would have made no great change. So in that sense, life, you would want to think, has something approaching a live and learn, or learn from experience to do this and see what happens and maybe improve it. But how would it know? It's not doing it with jackals, and so it doesn't matter if a jackal just before he's eating hollers, ah! What's life going to learn? Because it was not a mistake, it was not a failure. Now back, at least you lost your place. Who, me? And Kyroots said, sometimes failure is recognized as such, and sometimes it is not. Semicolon. Helping identify and exemplify the distinction is part of the service man renders to life. How about all these people that keep on your right and say that Kyroots picks on the poetic musings and inclinations of life? No, the whines of life, the melancholies, people saying my heart's broken, that's not stupidity. I mean, sure as hell, it's annoying. Who the hell wants to be around somebody like that if you're a rebel? But it's not some kind of stupidity. It's life in some way. It's man helping life identify, well, now here's a place that you could do something different. Well, sure, some of you might go, let me take a note. I could learn from that. Yeah, you say that now while you're not in the midst of melancholy. As soon as you go home and start spitting up the things that look like little pieces of Gruber's syndrome, and you think, uh-oh, I got to go have the test, then see. Then you want to sit down and think, what would Elizabeth Barrett Browning do under these conditions? And I had faith in you. I thought that you were a trooper and a warrior, a gypsy. Was it Noah and Daniel champion? I got them open. I don't know if anybody would like that one or not. Okay, page 33. Page 30 comes first, right? Put your hand on the television. Now put it in your pocket. Now find something that crinkles and mail it in. Oh. And I will be healed. I will feel much better. Maybe not healed, but I'll feel considerably better. All right, well, you know we've been using, or Kyroots has, without spelling it out, I'm sure some of you put it together, a kind of parabolic picturization of man and the evolution of man as an office, not an office, but as a building, a structure in the basement, in the mid-floors, in the penthouse, and et cetera, like the nervous system, the overall evolution of humanity, and one's own individual evolution. Just because you may have a penthouse and now think and talk, you still got a basement, you still got plumbing, you still got a heating system, and et cetera. So, based on that, we go to the ever-popular page 30. And Kyroots said, "Help! Help!" The voice cried out, "There's a plumber loose in my penthouse." Then there's a footnote down here. Less frequently do you hear explanations wherein this situation is apparently reversed. Now you can think up your own version. Don't make that's just reversed. It's somebody. And it's not that they do not occur. It's just that less often that anybody seems to ever think about mentioning it. Huh? Of course, I brought it up already once, and I'll do it again. Unless you put your hand in your that around rebel camps, several weeks ago somebody pointed out that around rebel camps there are more people hanging around, there are more Babe Ruths that imagine they're Einstein than vice versa. Maybe if I bring it up 10 or 12 times, somebody will go, wait a minute. Because I might go, wait a minute. My eyebrow's about to kill me. And Kyroots said, amidst all the fear, the chaos, and the confusion, the cry went up, our salvation rests solely. Our salvation alone lies with the lifeboats. And this was followed immediately by a counter cry of, hey, it was the lifeboats that made us start sinking anyway. I'm not going to read the epilogue. It doesn't need it. That's not life. Those of you really taking notes, there were several of a like ilk. One another, if I may be so bold, that complemented each other. Like page 34, earlier before we got here, said to page 17, my, don't you look nice? Well, I'll read this one again. It has to do with the way, the beginning I was going to skip, but it points out that this is the kind of info that might be of interest to people who are interested in how the mind works, but not, real interested. You know what I mean? I know ordinary people don't know what I mean because it's nuts. Bye.